Hello everybody and welcome to another video on the Cinema Speak YouTube channel. My name is Brad, I'm the host of the Cinema Speak podcast, and today we've got something special lined up for you. We've got a review of one of my most anticipated Blu-rays of the entire year. We're talking Vinegar Syndrome's Homegrown Horrors Volume 1. Now, I've been really looking forward to this ever since it was first announced, not only because it is a beautiful looking set, but I gotta say, the films sounded right up my alley and definitely appealed to me. So let's get into it. First, of course, Vinegar Syndrome, if you don't know, one of my favorite labels, put out a lot of great stuff, always, I don't want to say always quality releases, but they always, they pretty much always do put out good stuff. So Homegrown Horrors, it's one of their box sets. It is similar to their Forgotten Gialli box sets, if you're familiar with those. Same sort of setup here. You got the top that you can pop, and you can pop it off, and inside we've got 3 individual Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray cases. Let me grab that top again, actually. Jeepers. So I have to say, first of all, the artwork on this release, I think, is masterfully done. It's done by the Dude Designs. I really like the look of this set. I think the artwork, I like how they all kind of go together. Very well done. And really beautiful stuff. I like this design from the Dude Designs. Some of his other releases that he did for Vinegar Syndrome, his other artwork, such as Six String Samurai, I believe he did Tammy and the T-Rex as well. Some of his artwork, it's a little busy. This, I think, is simple enough, and I think it works. So we can pop out the individual cases, which have their own new artwork. We've got Beyond Dream's Door, Winterbeast, Fatal Exam. Obviously, I had never seen these because these are kind of forgotten cult, low-budget horror films. And according to Vinegar Syndrome's website, Homegrown Horrors, basically the idea is throughout the 1980s and 90s, independent and first-time filmmakers across the United States saw new opportunities to create work in the horror genre, often integrating the flavor and color of their inner America locales into their work. They created films that, while inspired by mainstream trends, are about as far from Hollywood as one can get. Collected here are 3 diverse films, all produced in the late 1980s, providing a fascinating and entertaining glimpse into the forgotten world of homegrown horror. Now, of course, this is Homegrown Horror Volume 1, so hopefully if this sells well, they'll continue the trend and we will get Homegrown Horror Volume 2, because, not to spoil my thoughts, but I thought this was a fantastic set. Where should we start? Let's start with Winterbeast. This was the first one that I watched. I'm knocking it over. Winterbeast, here's the artwork on that Blu-ray. Basically, the plot of this one is really hard to follow. You've got some park rangers who are dealing with monsters that are appearing in the woods and essentially just murdering, locals and tourists alike. People are getting killed by these monsters, and it has something to do with these totem poles. I was under the impression in the movie that the totem poles were actually somewhat preventing the monsters from going full-on crazy, so the totem poles were actually good. Every plot synopsis I've read actually said the totem poles were what were causing it. I don't know. It's confusing. Also, you have a guy who is running a lodge where there's some shady goings on there. It's a little bit Lynchian. It does feel very similar to Twin Peaks, and this was produced before Twin Peaks came out. So I don't know if it was inspired by David Lynch in general or if it's just a coincidence. Probably just a coincidence, but there's definitely some Twin Peaks vibes, especially with that lodge. Now, Winterbeast is extremely low budget, but the reason Winterbeast works is because of the creature effects and just the passion that is on display in this production. The creature effects are largely stop motion, and they are actually a lot of fun to watch. There's some really creative stuff here, and seeing what they're able to accomplish on a low budget is pretty damn cool. Performances are pretty horrendous, from what I understand. Almost entirely made up of non-actors. There's some really bad stuff here. And in terms of the direction, it's not all that accomplished either. Like, there's a lot of passion on display here, but in terms of talent, I don't know. I don't want to be rude, but there's a few sequences here that are simply one just like static shot. And it's that static shot, no movement with the camera, and it just stays there for like 5, 6, 7 minutes. Just the whole scene plays out with one shot. And it could be a budgetary issue, but some of that stuff feels pretty uninspired. But the film is wacky enough with its plot, and the monster stuff is so much fun that that's hardly an issue. It's also the shortest of these films. What are we looking at here? We're looking at a solid 76 minutes. You can't beat that. So, yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun with Winterbeast. This one, out of the three, it does fall into the territory most of so bad it's good. I don't know if I would totally give it that label. That feels, a little unfair because there is a lot of craft on display here in terms of the effects, and they're trying to accomplish something unique. Like, it's a unique location. This one, where was this one shot? I believe it was shot in Massachusetts, and you get a real local flavor there, and I like the setting, the rural woodsy setting, and I think that's pretty cool. I actually did think the guy who ran the hotel was pretty interesting and creepy. I actually think his performance was the best. He did have a really interesting screen presence, but he did not go on to do much of anything. So the film itself is, take it for what it is, very low budget. You got to know what you're in for. In terms of special features, we got some pretty good stuff here. There is a new commentary track with producer Mark Frizzle. I will say the director of this film, unfortunately, has passed away, so there's very little involvement from him for obvious reasons on this. There is a archive interview with him on here as well, but there is a new interview with producer Mark Frizzle, who is a very interesting guy. It's a really good interview, and he really gets into how he was inspired by stop motion from Ray Harryhausen effects and, that whole thing. And his interview was one of my favorites, really got some good insight into the production of the film and how just, difficult it was and how they were able to just kind of piece it together over the span of several years. Also, we've got several interviews with several actors in the feature. Now, I will say, unfortunately, a lot of those actor interviews are done through Zoom or Skype or some form of internet video call. Bit of a bummer. I don't know. I'm assuming it has to do with the pandemic, but it could also just be the fact that maybe these people weren't nearby. This is in Massachusetts, although I want to say Vinegar Syndrome is in Connecticut. That's where they're headquartered. So I'm assuming it's got more to do with the pandemic than anything. But, it is what it is. Take it or leave it. But it's a little bit of a bummer when you go to click on the special feature and you can tell it's just a video conference call, whatever. But surprisingly, one of my favorite special features on here is an interview with Simon Barrett, he's a screenwriter and director, probably best known for writing You're Next, The Guest, and Blair Witch. And his interview is actually very interesting and very insightful. He's just a fan of the film, and seeing his perspective as an actual filmmaker and why he thinks this film is valuable and worth watching. It's a good interview. It's really interesting, and I don't know how Vinegar Syndrome knew that he was a fan, but good on him. Good on you, Vinegar Syndrome. Good on you. You pop it open inside. We've got some just kind of original artwork there. Not the greatest, but it's cool that they include that to keep it with its homegrown horror roots, you know what I'm saying? And that's Winterbeast. It was not the best film in the bunch, but I feel like it honestly is the one I'd be most likely to go back and watch, because this would be a real fun one to put on with friends and just kind of have a real good time and not necessarily laugh at it, but laugh with it, because there's some bizarre stuff from the writing to the performances, even to the creatures, which obviously don't look amazing from a strictly speaking point of does it look real? Well, obviously these effects don't look real, but they look fun, and I think this could be a good party movie. So moving on, our next movie in the bunch is Beyond Dream's Door. Beyond Dream's Door, this one was made in, let me get it, it's Ohio. I remember this one. This one's made in Ohio. And honestly, this film is easily the best of the bunch. And I gotta say, this release is absolutely stunning. stacked. This is a stacked release, baby. First of all, this film is definitely just the most well made. It's hard to argue that because the director of this one, his name is Jay Wolfel. That's a good name, Wolfel. He clearly has some talent. He's actually got some talent, and like there's some impressive tracking shots in this that I'm surprised they were able to achieve with their budget. In terms of performances, there's not that many actors in the film, but performances are pretty strong as well. So what they are able to do on a super ultra low budget is really, really impressive. Basically, this one, we follow our main character whose name is Ben. Let me get it, Ben. Ben, he never dreams, and he's now finding that his dreams or his nightmares are bleeding into the real world. So he's never dreamed before, but now his dreams are becoming a reality, I suppose. And the more people that he tells about these dreams, well, then the dreams start to attack them or kill them or just do awful things to them. I don't know exactly. Kind of a cool premise. You know, you can take it a lot of places, and there is some real cool creature effects in here. They do have some pretty good gore, and like there's a moment where we witness a character who was just like savagely eaten, and some of the gore in that is pretty cool, and seeing them use that makeup on a low budget is pretty fun and entertaining. So yeah, there's some cool effects here, some real great camera work for a low budget film. It looks pretty solid, and I'll say all of these films are pretty good looking in terms of the transfer. Now, obviously, I think all of them were shot on 16. So, you know, there's quite a bit of wear and tear on all of these, and they're not going to look amazing. Like, these are not going to be demo disc material, but for what they are, like watching, especially Winterbeast, I was like, wow, I mean, this film has to look way better than it ever has. Like, the transfer job that Vinegar Syndrome did is truly stellar. Now, with one thing with Beyond Dream's Door is there were some film elements that were, I guess, beyond repair or lost in some way. So there are a few scenes and shots that they have to use tape to fill in the gaps. And that stuff, it's noticeable. It doesn't totally like ruin the experience. Like, it's not so bad that it just like takes you out of it and ruins it. But the stuff that was, you know, they used tape. They didn't have the original 16 millimeter elements. That stuff is pretty. It's noticeable, and you got to call it out for what it is. But hey, they worked with the best they had. In terms of special features, you got a lot of stuff. You've got 4 commentary tracks. That's 4 times the movie. You've got 4 times the movie in commentary tracks. I mean, obviously, I did not listen to every single commentary track, but you've got 2 of them brand new, 2 of them archival, so tons of commentaries. If you're a commentary head, this is the release for you. You've also got a making of documentary that's about 45 minutes or so. It's an okay documentary. I didn't get too much out of it. I mean, it was cool, interesting to hear the director talk about the experience. I don't know. I didn't get too much passion from anybody. I mean, it was okay, and it's not like anybody like hated their time working on it or didn't seem like they wanted to talk about the film. But I don't know. I've seen better making of documentaries. And you've got a few other cool things. One thing that's interesting about this film is that it was actually shot and produced through the Ohio State University. So in a lot of ways, it's actually a student film, which is really cool. And you get a few cool bonus features on here where they have some local news segments that highlight that fact. And I think there's like maybe 3 or 4, and you can watch the local news segments where they interview the director, and you get a little behind the scenes footage of them shooting the film with these news broadcasts. And that's pretty cool. I like that. I appreciated that. You pop open the case, you got the disc in there. Let's see, what was the original artwork looking like? Yeah, I mean, you know, I definitely like the new artwork better, but you know, that was a cool moment in the film, I suppose. And yeah, it's got some good effects. It's well directed. It's well acted for this kind of film. This is a solid release. And I had seen a few people mention on Blu-ray.com in the forums that they probably could have honestly released this film entirely on its own, and it would be worth the admission price. Yeah, this is a solid enough release where if this was a, you know, $20, $25 release, I would probably recommend it on its own. Like, that's how loaded this is with special features. I mean, come on. 4 commentary tracks, get real. That's awesome. So yeah, Beyond Dream's Door, definitely the best film of the bunch and probably the most stacked release of the bunch. And that brings us to Fatal Exam. Now, Fatal Exam, going into it, I had heard that it was easily the worst of the bunch. Easily the worst of the bunch. And I have to say, I do agree that it is the worst film of the bunch. But actually, this was better than I thought it was going to be. Because I'd gone in with such low expectations from what I'd heard from other people. I was actually pleasantly surprised with Fatal Exam. Even if it's not a good or great film, I still find quite a bit to love with it. Now, this is directed by Jack Snyder, not Zack Snyder. No, don't get confused with Zack Snyder. This is Jack Snyder, who Jack Snyder actually has kind of made a career from this film. He's directed a few things with a few actors who are at least known faces. I don't remember what any of those names or faces were or what the titles of those movies were, but I was actually, pleasantly surprised that he does have he has a career. He's made a career, so that's cool. And also the director of Beyond Dream's Door, he made a career as well. A lot of his films, not to judge a book by its cover, but a lot of those films look like shit. So, but hey, at least it's a career. Better than I'm doing just talking on YouTube. So anyway, Fatal Exam, love the premise of this one. You've got a group of psychology students. Is it psychology or is it, I want to say it's like parapsychology or something. But anyway, a group of college students are tasked with basically their final exam of the semester is their professor wants them to go into this mansion where a family was murdered and document any strange happenings because there is rumor that there are hauntings going on at this place. So you get these college students who go to this house, and it's an interesting mix of supernatural that eventually turns into a slasher film as the film progresses. You start to get some cloaked, hooded figures who are knocking people off, and it kind of goes from there. One thing that I was actually very surprised with is that I thought this was going to start supernatural and then go full-blown slasher, and we find out that the supernatural stuff is just all a load of crap. Well, turns out that the supernatural stuff actually stays in the movie until the very end. In fact, the last 20 minutes are probably the best of this film. And there's a really cool stop motion demon at the end that I thought was pretty well done. I mean, it's rough, but it's very charming. That's a good word to use for a lot of these movies is charming because, do they nail it and knock it out of the park? Not necessarily, but very charming. Now, the big problem with Fatal Exam is that it is just way too long. This movie is way too long. I mean, we are looking at a runtime of 114 minutes. Come on. Definitely, they could have trimmed this runtime up, and I think if this movie was like a half hour shorter, maybe even 20 minutes shorter, genuinely could have been my favorite of the bunch. It's fun because it's got a lot of weird moments. I like the slasher stuff. I like the supernatural stuff. It's just too long, takes too long to get where it's going, and, it does have its moments of budgetary issues. The house that they're in is actually just the house of one of the actors, and it's pretty boring to look at. We spend the majority of time in the house, and it's basically just blank walls. Not that interesting. If this was a bigger budget film, they would have stayed in a grander mansion, but this just feels like a boring house. You'll take it as it is. So the film has got its flaws. I still found it fairly watchable, surprisingly, even in spite of the length. I gotta say, not a ton of special features on this one. Really, you've only got a new commentary track. I believe it is a new commentary track and a brand new making of documentary. Again, the making of documentary here, it's about 45 minutes or so, and it surprisingly was more fun than the Beyond Dream's Door documentary. This one, it was shot during the COVID pandemic, so there is a few video conference call interviews, and there is kind of one big group interview, and in that group interview, everybody's wearing masks. It is what it is. You can't really fault them for that. But there's also some one-on-one interviews where it was shot at the same time, but obviously they were able to, when one-on-one interview, they took their mask off, and I'm sure whoever was filming it had the mask on, but you get some, face time with the director and some of these actors, and they have a blast talking about this movie. You can tell they love talking about it. The one actor, I believe, who plays Roger in the film, he is a hoot in this interview. He's actually genuinely really funny, full of energy, and I thought this was a really great making of documentary. Some really cool behind the scenes tidbits. Specifically, there's one where there's a scene early on in the college classroom, and apparently they weren't even supposed to shoot in that college classroom. Their permission was revoked by the university. So what they ended up doing was they ended up sneaking through a window, and they brought in the entire cast through this window, brought in all their equipment, and at one point, campus PD actually came into the classroom, and the director just basically told them to get out because they were filming, and campus PD walked out. And it's a pretty good tidbit, pretty good stuff there. I did not listen to the commentary, but if it's anything with the level of fun and camaraderie as the making of documentary, it's probably a really good commentary track. So you open it up inside. But you do have the reversible artwork there. That artwork is from the film. They do find a piece of artwork that sort of foreshadows their potential fate. So there you go. And then you pop them all back in. Put them just as you found it, just like this. Boom. Bam. Boom. We are done. Put it on the shelf. You're done. Beautiful. So, yeah, I would say this is a highly recommended set. I had a good time with all the films. Again, you got to know what you're going in for. These are low budget films. But if you're a fan of low budget horror and creative horror and regional horror, then this is a must buy. Highly recommend Vinegar Syndrome's Homegrown Horror set. I don't even know how I'm going to rate these Blu-ray reviews. Am I going to go out of 5? Am I going to give it a letter grade? Let's go out of 10. I would give this, honestly, a 9.1 out of 10. 9.1 for Homegrown Horrors. I don't know why I pulled out that number out of a hat. Just kind of popped in my head. It feels right. 9.1 out of 10. Highly recommended. Probably my favorite Blu-ray release of 2021. So there you go. But if you guys have seen any of these films, or if you own the Homegrown Horrors Volume 1 set, let me know what you thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and talk about the films with you. Comment below if that's your thing, I guess. Anyway, I'm Brad, host of the Cinema Speak podcast. Obviously, subscribe here on YouTube. And, we do have a podcast as well where we have new release movie reviews. And I've talked about all these movies extensively on that show as well. So search for Cinema Speak on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, heck, wherever you find your shows. Just subscribe here on YouTube, like this video. You know how it works now. I don't have to go through this whole thing, do I? Anyway, that was Homegrown Horrors Volume 1. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Have a good one. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.